On the night of February 14, 2025, a man who was worth $180 million died in a house in Hillsborough, California, at the age of 79. His name was Franklin Alcott. His son was at his bedside. The last thing he said, according to his attorney, was, "Tell Cora I kept my promise." 3 days later, his attorney drove 12 miles north to a small apartment on a side street off Mission Street in Daly City, California, and delivered that message to my mother. My mother is Corazon Domingo. She is 55 years old. She was born in Iloilo City, in the Philippines, and she came to this country in 1994 with my father, who died of a heart attack in 2007 when I was 10 years old. She cleaned houses in Hillsborough and Atherton for 28 years. She raised me alone. She never once asked anyone for anything. 6 years ago, on a rainy Wednesday night in October, I brought home a stranger who was sitting in the rain on a bench in front of the Filipino grocery store where I worked. He was old, cold, hungry, and my mother did not know what I know now and what I am about to tell you. That stranger, that beggar in wet clothes eating Pondasol from a plastic bag, was Franklin Alcott. And what my mother did for him in the next 3 days, without ever knowing who he was, and what she refused from him 6 months later when he came back and tried to give her a house, is the reason I am telling you this story tonight. My mother would never tell it herself. She would say it was nothing. That is why it has to be me. My name is Miguel Domingo. I am 28 years old. This is what happened. I need to tell you about my mother first, or none of this will make sense. My parents came to the United States in the summer of 1994 through a family sponsorship petition filed by my mother's older sister, Tita Remedios, who had immigrated in 1978 and become a nurse in San Francisco. My mother was 24 years old. My father was 26. They landed at San Francisco International Airport on August 3, 1994, with 3 suitcases between them and $840 in cash. My father had a job lined up as a maintenance technician at a hotel in South San Francisco. My mother didn't have a job yet, but she had a cleaning credential from the Philippines, and my aunt had contacts at a housekeeping service that placed workers in wealthy homes on the peninsula. 2 weeks after they arrived, my mother started cleaning houses in Hillsborough, Atherton, and Woodside. She would remain in the same industry, for the same service, for the next 28 years. I was born on September 12, 1996, at Seton Medical Center in Daly City. I was their only child. My mother had 2 miscarriages between 1998 and 2001, and after that, she and my father accepted quietly that I would be the only one. She never spoke about it. I only learned about the miscarriages after my father died, when I found a small envelope in her drawer with 2 hospital wristbands inside. My father died on the morning of March 14, 2007. He was 39 years old. He had a massive heart attack in the parking lot of the hotel where he worked, 5 minutes before his shift was supposed to start. A coworker found him. The paramedics could not revive him. He was pronounced dead at Kaiser Permanente, South San Francisco Medical Center, at 7:22 in the morning. I was 10 years old. My mother did not cry in front of me for the first 6 months after my father died. She got up at 5:30 in the morning. She made my breakfast. She walked me to school. She went to work. She came home. She made dinner. She helped me with my homework. She read her Bible before bed. She prayed the rosary. She did not cry. Once, 6 months after the funeral, I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and I heard her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with the lights off, crying, with her face pressed into her hands, so that she would not make any noise. I stood in the hallway for a long time. I did not know what to do. I went back to bed. I never told her I had heard her. That was my mother. By the time I was 22 years old, in the fall of 2018, we lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on a side street called Wellington Way, just off Mission Street in Daly City. The rent was $2,100 a month, which was more than my mother made in 3 weeks of cleaning houses. To help pay it, my mother had taken in a boarder, a widowed Filipino woman named Nanay Lita Villanueva, who was 68 years old and had come to San Francisco in 1976. Nane Lita paid $700 a month for the second bedroom, which meant I slept on a small cot in the corner of my mother's room. I had been doing that since I was 17. I did not mind. My mother had raised me without complaint, and a cot in her room was the least I could do for her while I finished school. I was a student at Skyline College in San Bruno, taking my nursing prerequisites. I planned to transfer to a Bachelor of Science in Nursing program the following year. I worked part-time in the evenings at a Filipino grocery store called Manila Market on Saramonte Boulevard, 5 nights a week, from 4:30 p.m. until closing at 10:30. I made $14.75 an hour. My take-home pay was about $1,800 a month. I gave my mother $1,000 of it every month and used the rest for tuition, books, gas, for my 2003 Toyota Corolla, and my dates with Annalyn Ramos, my girlfriend since 2017, who was also studying nursing at Skyline. That was our life in October of 2018. It was not easy. It was ours. Wednesday, October 24th, 2018, was a rainy night in Daly City. Daly City has its own weather. We call it the fog belt because we sit right in the path of the marine layer that rolls in off the Pacific Ocean, and even when the rest of the Bay Area is sunny, we are often gray and cold. That Wednesday, the temperature dropped into the low 50s by 6 in the evening, and around 8 o'clock the rain started coming down in the steady, sideways way it does when a Pacific storm system sits over San Mateo County for the night. I had worked my closing shift at Manila Market. It had been a slow night because of the rain. My boss, Kuya Ronel, told me at 10:15 that I could take home the day's unsold pandesal, which was a normal employee benefit at our store. Filipino grocery stores baked fresh pandesal every day, and what didn't sell by closing time was either given to employees or donated to Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church, 3 blocks away. That night, there were 6 pieces left. I bagged them in a plastic sack and helped Kuya Ronel lock the store at 10:30. I stepped outside into the rain. My car was parked around the corner on the side street, about 100 yards from the storefront. I pulled the hood of my sweatshirt up and started walking. Then I saw him. There was a wooden bench at the corner of Saramonte Boulevard and Junipero Serra Boulevard, in front of the closed real estate office next door to Manila Market. An old man was sitting on the bench in the rain. He had a beard. He was wearing a wet flannel jacket, wet jeans, and old brown boots. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He had no umbrella. He was not moving. I had seen the same man earlier that evening when I had gone out to take the store's trash to the dumpster around 7 o'clock. He had been sitting on the same bench then, dry, watching the street. I had not thought anything of it. Daly City had its share of homeless people, and I had learned, growing up, not to stare. But now, it was 3.5 hours later. The rain was falling steadily, the temperature had dropped, and he was still there. I stopped walking. I stood at the corner for maybe 15 seconds. Then I walked over to the bench. The man looked up when I approached. His eyes were the first thing I noticed. They were sharp. They were clear. They were not the eyes of a person who was confused or lost or drunk. They were the eyes of a person who was tired and cold and paying very close attention. I held out the plastic bag. "Sir, I have some bread. Would you like it?" He took the bag. His hands were shaking a little from the cold. He opened it, looked inside, and looked back up at me. "Thank you," he said. His voice was hoarse. He had a very slight cough. He spoke with the precise, careful diction of someone who had gone to school for a long time. That was the second thing I noticed. "Do you have somewhere to go, sir? Out of the rain?" He held my eyes for a moment before he answered. "No, I don't." I stood there. The rain was coming down harder. Water was running off my hood and dripping onto my sleeves. I do not remember making a decision. I remember taking out my phone. I remember calling my mother. I remember her answering on the second ring, in the flat, business-like tone she used when she was tired at the end of the day. "Miguel, are you on your way home?" "Nay, there is a man here, an old man. He is on the bench in front of the store. It's raining. He has nowhere to go. There was a pause of maybe 3 seconds. Bring him home. That was it. That was the whole conversation. I put my phone in my pocket. I looked at the old man. Sir, my mother says you can come with me. We have a couch. It is dry. She will give you something to eat. The man looked at me for a long moment. Something moved across his face that I did not understand at the time. Later, much later, I would understand that it was the specific look of a person who had spent hours testing the world and had not expected the test to be answered. He stood up slowly. He was tall, maybe 6'1", though he was stooped from the cold. He picked up a small canvas bag that had been at his feet. Thank you, he said again. We walked the 2 blocks to my car in the rain without speaking. I opened the passenger door for him. He sat down carefully. I got in on the driver's side. The Corolla's heater took a minute to warm up. I drove the 6 blocks to our apartment on Wellington Way, slowly, watching the street signs, glancing at him occasionally in the rear view and side mirrors. He stared out the window at the rain the entire drive. I parked in front of our building. It was a 2-story stucco apartment building, painted beige, built sometime in the 1960s. Our apartment was on the 2nd floor, Unit 2B. There was an external staircase up the side of the building. I helped him out of the car. He was slower now, stiffer. We walked up the stairs. My mother opened the door before I knocked. She had put on a clean apron. She had a towel folded over her arm. She had heated water for tea. Come in, sir, she said. You are welcome in our home. Please. The man stepped into our apartment and stopped in the doorway. I have thought about that moment many times over the years, what our apartment looked like to him, what it must have looked like through the eyes of a man who owned 340 rental properties in the Bay Area and lived in a 12,000-square-foot house in Hillsborough. Our living room was 10 feet by 12 feet. The couch was a brown fabric sectional we had bought second-hand from a Filipino family in 2011 when they moved back to the Philippines. There was a small television on a wooden stand, a crucifix on the wall above the couch, a framed photograph of my father on his wedding day, next to a photograph of me at my first communion, a small altar in the corner, with a statue of the Sacred Heart and a votive candle that my mother lit every evening. The kitchen was visible through an open doorway, small, immaculate, smelling of the adobo my mother had cooked for dinner. Down the short hallway, 2 doors, one for the bedroom my mother and I shared, one for Nanay Lita's room. He took it all in. His face did not change. My mother took the towel from her arm and offered it to him. Please, dry your hair. Then I have dry clothes for you. Then you will eat. He took the towel. He dried his face and hair carefully. My mother went into her bedroom and came back with a folded stack of clothes. They were my father's clothes. I froze when I saw them. I looked at my mother. She looked back at me without any change in her expression, but I knew what she was giving to a stranger. Those clothes had been in a cardboard box on the top shelf of her closet since March of 2007. She had never given them away. She had never let me offer them to Goodwill. She had not been able to. She was giving them to a beggar who had walked in from the rain. These belonged to my husband, she told him quietly. He was your size. Please, take them. The man looked at the folded clothes. He looked at my mother. He looked at me. He did not say anything. He took the clothes. He went into the small bathroom off the hallway. He closed the door. While he was in the bathroom, my mother went back to the kitchen. She heated the adobo. She scooped rice from the rice cooker onto a plate. She poured hot water into a mug and added a Lipton tea bag. She put a small dish of soy sauce and calamansi next to the plate. She set everything on the small kitchen table. The man came out of the bathroom in my father's clothes, a gray long-sleeved shirt, brown corduroy pants, and thick wool socks. The clothes were a little loose on him, but they fit. His hair was combed back with his hands. He looked 10 years younger than he had on the bench. My mother pulled out a chair. Please sit. Eat. He sat down. He looked at the plate for a moment. He looked up at my mother. Thank you, ma'am. I do not know your name. Corazon, my mother said. Please, call me Cora. Cora. "My name is Frank." That was it. That was what he told us his name was. He picked up the fork. He ate the adobo and rice slowly, the way a person eats when they have not eaten a real meal in a long time and are trying to remember how to do it properly. My mother sat across from him at the table. She did not eat with him. She just sat and watched him and drank her own cup of tea. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen and watched them both. When he finished, my mother took his plate to the sink. Frank sat at the table with his hands folded. "You are very kind, Cora." "It is nothing. Anyone would do this." Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he said, very softly, "No, ma'am, they would not." My mother did not respond. She washed the plate. She dried it. She put it back in the cabinet. That night, we made up the couch for him with a fitted sheet, a pillow, and the extra wool blanket my mother kept in the hall closet for cold nights. He thanked her. She turned off the living room light. He went to sleep almost immediately. I lay awake on my cot in my mother's room for a long time. My mother did not sleep for a while either. I could hear her rosary beads clicking softly in the dark. He stayed with us for 3 days. On Thursday morning, my mother got up at 5:30 as she always did. She made coffee. She made pandesal from scratch. She kept flour and yeast in the pantry for weekends. She made scrambled eggs with garlic rice and small pieces of the leftover adobo from the night before. She set the table for 4, herself, me, Frank, and Nene Lita. Nene Lita came out of her room in her housecoat at 6:15, saw Frank at the kitchen table, and did not react with any surprise at all. Nene Lita had lived in enough Filipino households over the past 42 years to understand that if a stranger was at the breakfast table, there was a reason, and my mother would tell her the reason when the reason needed telling. She sat down. She said good morning to Frank in English. Frank said good morning back. They ate. After breakfast, my mother did something I did not expect. She called Father Iggy. Father Ignacio Reyes was the priest at Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church, 3 blocks from our apartment. He was 58 years old. He had been born in Cebu in the Philippines and had come to the United States in 1979 to enter seminary in San Francisco. He had been at our parish since 2003. My mother had known him for 15 years. He was, in every practical sense, our family's spiritual counselor. My mother spoke to him briefly in Tagalog on the phone. She said, "There is an old man here who needs prayers. Can you come?" Father Iggy came at 10:30. He was a short, round-faced man, with wire-rimmed glasses, and the perpetual warmth of a priest who had spent 30 years hearing the confessions of working-class Filipinos. He greeted Frank at the door with a handshake and no ceremony. He accepted a cup of coffee. He sat with Frank at the small kitchen table for about 40 minutes. I do not know exactly what they talked about. My mother and I stayed in the living room to give them privacy. But I could hear the low tones of their voices, and at one point I heard Father Iggy pray softly in English, the Our Father, and then a specific prayer for a soul in distress that I recognized from the funeral of an uncle years earlier. When Father Iggy left, he squeezed my mother's shoulder gently at the door and said something to her in Tagalog that I did not quite catch. She nodded. He left. That afternoon, my mother took Frank to the free clinic. Frank had been coughing since the night before, a dry, rattling cough that concerned my mother. There was a free clinic connected to Seton Medical Center that served uninsured patients on a walk-in basis Tuesdays and Thursdays. My mother had used it once herself, in 2015, when she had a persistent chest infection. She knew the intake nurse there, a Filipina named Mrs. Pilar Sanchez. I drove them both. My mother made Frank sit in the front seat because it was more comfortable. She sat in the back with her purse in her lap. At the clinic, Mrs. Sanchez took Frank's vitals. A young doctor named Dr. Adam Patel, probably in his early 30s, examined Frank. He listened to Frank's lungs. He looked at his throat. He asked questions about medical history. Frank answered vaguely. He had not seen a doctor in some time. He generally had good health. He was not currently on any medications. All of these were, I would later learn, deliberate half-truths. designed to avoid revealing his real identity through his answers. But he did not lie about his symptoms, and Dr. Patel did not press. Dr. Patel diagnosed the beginning of a bronchial infection. He prescribed a 5-day course of azithromycin. The clinic dispensed it on-site free of charge. We drove home. Frank thanked my mother in the car. My mother said, "You are welcome. You will feel better in 2 days." That night, my mother made luga, Filipino rice porridge, with ginger and chicken, because it was what she made for me whenever I had been sick as a child. Frank ate 2 bowls of it. He said it was the best thing he had eaten in a very long time. On Friday, Marisol Aquino came over. Marisol was 52 years old, my mother's co-worker at the housekeeping service, and her closest friend in the world. Marisol had emigrated from Manila in 1998 and had worked alongside my mother in Peninsula homes for 20 years. She had heard, through my mother's brief mention on the phone the night before, that Cora had a guest in her home. Marisol did not come empty-handed. She brought a large aluminum tray of pancit palabok, a plastic container of leche flan, and half a dozen mangoes from the Filipino market on mission. She hugged my mother at the door, greeted Nanay Lita warmly, and shook Frank's hand with the same friendly, direct manner she used with everyone. Marisol was a talker. She sat down at the kitchen table and immediately began telling stories about the difficult client my mother had cleaned for that morning in Atherton, about her nephew's wedding in December, about the price of rice at Manila Market that week. Frank listened. He asked her a few questions. She answered enthusiastically. At one point, Marisol asked Frank where he was from. Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have lived in the Bay Area for most of my life." "You have family here?" "I have a son. We do not see each other often." Marisol nodded with the compassionate understanding of a Filipino woman who had lived long enough to know that many families carried grief and distance. That evening, after Marisol had gone home and Nanay Lita had gone to bed early as she always did, Frank sat in the living room reading an old copy of a National Geographic magazine my mother kept on the coffee table. I sat at the kitchen table doing my organic chemistry homework. My mother sat next to me and quietly sorted a small pile of coupons she had cut out from the Sunday paper. Frank looked up from the magazine. "Miguel." I turned to him. "You are studying?" "Yes, sir. I am at Skyline College. I am doing my prerequisites for nursing school." "You want to be a nurse?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" I had been asked that question by professors, by advisors, by strangers making conversation. I had a few practiced answers I usually gave. But something about the way Frank had asked, the quiet, real interest in his voice, made me tell him the truth. My father died of a heart attack when I was 10. There was no one at the hotel who knew what to do. If someone had known, if a nurse had been there, maybe he would not have died. I do not want other people to lose their fathers because there was no one nearby who knew what to do. Frank looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "That is a good reason." He went back to reading. My mother did not look up from her coupons, but I saw her hand still for a moment on the pile. On Saturday morning, October 27th, 2018, Frank told my mother he needed to leave. He had eaten breakfast with us. He had taken his last dose of the antibiotic. His cough was almost gone. He was wearing my father's clothes and the wool socks. He had washed his own damp clothes from the rainy night in our little washing machine on Thursday, and they had dried on the drying rack. He stood in the living room with his small canvas bag. "Cora, I cannot thank you enough for what you have done. I want to give you something." My mother shook her head immediately. "You do not owe me anything. This was not for payment." Frank reached into his canvas bag. He took out a small piece of paper. He had written a phone number on it in careful ballpoint pen. "This is my number. If you or Miguel ever need anything, anything at all, I would like you to call it, please." My mother took the paper. She looked at it. She folded it once, carefully. She placed it on the small side table next to the couch. She did not put it in her pocket. "Thank you, Frank, but I do not think we will need to call. God provides for us. He provided for you when you needed it. That is how it works." Frank stood there for a moment. I could see him wanting to say something and not being able to find the words. Finally, he said, "Thank you, Cora. I will not forget this." He turned to me. "Miguel, study hard. Be a good nurse." "I will, sir." He walked to the door. My mother opened it for him. He stepped out into the morning light, clear, cool, the fog burning off over Saramonte. He walked down the outdoor staircase, turned left on Wellington Way, and disappeared around the corner toward Mission Street. My mother closed the door. She stood there for a moment, with her hand still on the doorknob. Then she went to the kitchen and started washing the breakfast dishes. The piece of paper with Frank's phone number sat on the side table for 3 days before my mother finally moved it. She did not throw it away. She placed it in a small tin box she kept on her dresser, where she also kept my father's old wedding ring, my first communion prayer card, and the 2 hospital wristbands from her miscarriages. She did not tell me she had put it there. I did not know until much later. Life went on. November passed. December. Christmas. My mother made lechon paksiw, and pancit, and puto, for our small Christmas Eve gathering with Nanay Lita, Marisol's husband Danny, and Father Iggy. I gave my mother a new set of pearl earrings I had saved for since September. She gave me a leather notebook for my nursing rotations. Annalyn came over on Christmas Day, and my mother made her feel like family, as she always did. I started my spring semester at Skyline in January 2019. My grades were strong. My nursing school application was submitted. I was waiting to hear back from the RN program at City College of San Francisco and from San Francisco State University's BSN program. My mother continued her work. She cleaned houses in Hillsborough and Atherton Monday through Friday. She worked evenings at the small Filipino-owned assisted living facility on the weekends. She did not mention Frank again. Neither did I. It began to feel, that winter, like a strange, rainy dream we had shared, and both quietly stopped talking about. Then, on Saturday, April 13th, 2019, at 2 in the afternoon, there was a knock on our door. I was home that afternoon. Annalyn was over. We were sitting at the kitchen table studying together for our microbiology final. My mother was at the stove making merienda, a snack of ginataang bilo-bilo, sweet rice balls and coconut milk with sliced bananas. I opened the door. A man stood in the doorway wearing a plain dark suit and a white shirt. He was clean-shaven. His hair was combed back. He looked tall, older, distinguished. Behind him, on the outdoor landing, stood a woman in a charcoal pantsuit holding a leather briefcase. She was maybe 60, Japanese-American, with short silver hair and steady eyes. I did not recognize him for the first 3 seconds. Then I did. The man saw the recognition in my face. He did not smile. He said quietly, "Hello, Miguel. I am sorry to disturb you. May I speak with your mother?" My mother had come to the door behind me. She had a wooden spoon in her hand. She looked at the man. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, very calmly, "You look better, Frank." The man's eyes went slightly bright. He said, "Ma'am, may we come in?" My mother stepped aside. The man came in. The woman with the briefcase came in behind him. Annalyn stood up from the kitchen table and quietly gathered her books. She could tell without being told that this was a family conversation. She kissed me on the cheek, hugged my mother, and quietly let herself out. She would text me an hour later asking if everything was okay. I would not answer for 2 hours. We all sat down in the living room, Frank on the couch, the woman next to him, my mother on the wooden dining chair she brought in from the kitchen, me on the floor by my mother's feet, the way I had sat since I was a small child when there were adult conversations happening. The woman introduced herself first. "Mrs. Domingo, my name is Elizabeth Nakamura. I am Mr. Alcott's personal attorney. I have been Mr. Alcott's attorney for 23 years. I am here today because Mr. Alcott has asked me to help him explain something to you, and because he may be asking you for something very significant, and I want to make sure that any decision you make is one you make with full information and full freedom." My mother nodded. Frank cleared his throat. His voice, when he spoke, was steady, but carried the specific, quiet weight of a man saying something he had rehearsed many times in his own head. Cora, my name is Franklin Alcott. I am 73 years old. I live in Hillsborough. I own a real estate company that manages approximately 340 residential rental properties across the San Francisco Bay Area. My net worth is approximately $180 million. My mother's face did not change. Frank continued. The night I came to your home in October, the night your son brought me here from the rain, I was not a homeless man. I was conducting an experiment. My wife Eleanor died 9 years ago. My son and I have not been close for many years. I have been struggling, in the last several years, with a question that I could not answer inside my own life. The question was whether people treated each other with kindness only when there was something to gain. He paused. I decided to find out. I grew a beard. I bought used clothes. I chose a community I had no connection to. I spent 1 week living as a man with nothing to offer. Daly City was the second night. Serramonte Boulevard was the second location. Your son was the first person in over 4 hours who spoke to me as if I were a human being. He looked at my mother. You are the only person in 7 days who took me into their home. My mother's hands were folded in her lap. She was looking at Frank steadily. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she said, Frank, why are you telling me this now? Frank looked at Elizabeth Nakamura. Elizabeth Nakamura nodded slightly. Frank said, Because I need your help. My son David filed a legal petition against me 5 weeks ago. He is asking a court to declare me mentally incompetent and to place me under his conservatorship. He is claiming that my behavior in the fall of 2018, including my week of being absent from my normal life, is evidence of cognitive decline. The hearing is scheduled for April 22nd, next week. Elizabeth Nakamura spoke. Mrs. Domingo, Mr. Alcott's defense includes his testimony that he was conducting a deliberate personal experiment during that week. We have his private journal from that period. We have Dr. Margaret Sung, a geriatric psychiatrist, who has evaluated him and will testify to his current cognitive competence. But the strongest possible evidence would be a witness who spent time with him during that specific week and can testify that he was mentally clear, coherent, and functional. That witness is you. My mother looked from Elizabeth Nakamura to Frank and back to Elizabeth Nakamura. You want me to speak in court? Yes, ma'am. My mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked Frank one question. Will helping you hurt anyone else? Frank thought about it carefully before he answered. I remember watching his face while he thought. He did not rush. Cora, the only person my testimony might hurt is my son. But my son is the person who is trying to take my life from me. He is not trying to help me. He is trying to control me. If I lose this case, I will lose the ability to make decisions about my own money, my own property, and my own life. And my son will use that control the way he has been using our relationship for years, to take, not to give. My mother thought about that for a while. Then she said, I will help you, but I ask you for one thing. Frank leaned forward slightly. Anything. Whatever happens with your son, whether you win or you lose, before you die, you must try. You must try to make peace with him. A mother who buries a son and a son who buries a father without peace between them, that is the deepest wound I know. I will not help you fight your son unless you promise me that when this is over, you will try. Frank was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, smaller. I promise you, Cora, I will try. Then I will speak in court. Frank closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he said, Thank you. Elizabeth Nakamura took a folder out of her briefcase. She placed it on the coffee table. Mrs. Domingo, because we do not want anyone to be able to say later that you were pressured, or paid, or influenced, we are going to do this the following way. I will come back on Wednesday, April 17th, to prepare you for court. I will not tell you what to say. I will explain what to expect, the setting, the questions you may be asked, the procedure. What you say on the stand will be your own words, your own memory, your own truth. My mother nodded. Elizabeth Nakamura then added, carefully, Mr. Alcott would like to compensate you for your time and any expenses. This is standard for a witness. My mother shook her head immediately. I do not need to be paid to tell the truth. I will come, that is all. Elizabeth Nakamura looked at Frank. Frank looked at my mother. He said, Thank you, Cora. They stood up to leave. At the door, Frank turned to me. Miguel, may I ask you a question? Yes, sir. That night in October, why did you stop? I thought about it. You were sitting in the rain, sir. I had bread. My mother had a couch. Frank looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Thank you, he said. He and Elizabeth Nakamura walked down the outdoor staircase and got into a black car parked at the curb. They drove away. I closed the door. My mother went back to the stove. She stirred the ginatang bilo-bilo. It had almost burned. She turned off the heat. She put a lid on the pot. Then she sat down at the kitchen table, and for the second time in my life, I watched my mother cry. She did not cry loudly. She cried the way she had cried in the kitchen when I was 10 years old, with her face in her hands, trying not to make noise. I sat down beside her. I did not say anything. She reached out one hand and put it on my arm, and kept it there for a long time. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. Miguel, anak, God gives us tests. Sometimes we do not know we are being tested. Do you understand this? Yes, nay. That night in October, that was a test. We did not know. We did not care. That is why it was a real test. Do you understand? Yes, nay. Now God is asking me to speak in a court, to defend a man against his own son. This is a hard thing, but if he asks, I must go. I put my hand over hers. I will go with you, nay. I will sit in the courtroom. You will not be alone. My mother nodded. She reached for her rosary. Elizabeth Nakamura came to the apartment on Wednesday, April 17th, at 4 in the afternoon. She was as gentle and precise as she had been on Saturday. She explained what would happen in court on Monday. She explained who Judge Harriet Whitaker was, what Department 12 looked like, what the difference was between direct examination and cross-examination. She explained what the opposing attorney, William Rathborne, was likely to ask my mother. She explained that my mother could answer in English or through an interpreter, whichever felt more comfortable. My mother said she would answer in English, but would like the interpreter available in case she needed a specific word. Elizabeth Nakamura did not tell my mother what to say. She only prepared her for the setting. Before she left, Elizabeth Nakamura said, Mrs. Domingo, I have practiced law for 38 years. Most witnesses I prepare need coaching. You do not. You need only to tell what happened. That is all I want from you on Monday. My mother nodded. That night, my mother pressed her navy Sunday church dress. She polished the small black shoes she had worn to my father's funeral in 2007 and had almost never worn since. She placed her white lace mantilla in her purse. She placed her rosary in the pocket of her dress. She was ready. Monday, April 22nd, 2019. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at San Mateo County Superior Court, Department 12, in Redwood City. Redwood City is about 20 miles south of Daly City on Highway 101. I drove my mother in my Corolla. Annalyn rode with us. I had asked for the morning off from Manila Market. My mother had asked her housekeeping service for the day off. She did not tell them why. She said only that she had a personal matter. We arrived at 9:15. The courthouse was a large, modern building with a security checkpoint at the entrance. We went through the metal detector. My mother's rosary set off the beep. The security officer, a Latino man in his 40s, smiled kindly at my mother when she showed him what it was. He waved us through. We went to the 3rd floor. Department 12 was a mid-sized courtroom with dark wood paneling, 12 rows of gallery seating, a raised judge's bench, 2 attorney tables, a witness stand, and a jury box on the right side, though this hearing did not involve a jury. Elizabeth Nakamura met us at the door. She led my mother to a seat in the front row of the gallery. Frank was already there, seated at the defense table with a younger attorney I did not recognize. He turned around when we came in. He gave my mother a small nod. He was in a dark gray suit. He looked calm. At the opposing table sat a man in his 50s in a black pinstripe suit, William Rathborne, and a middle-aged man in a navy suit whom I understood to be David Alcott. David had his father's height and his father's straight posture, but his eyes were cold and calculating, in a way Frank's had never been, even the first night I had met him in the rain. Judge Harriet Whitaker took the bench at 10:04. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled into a low bun, half-moon reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She had the calm, unhurried demeanor of a judge who had presided over a great many family disputes and had learned to distrust theatrical performances. The hearing began. I will not describe every moment of what followed, because much of it was the technical work of a legal proceeding. William Rathborne opened for the petitioner, his client, David Alcott. He argued that Frank's behavior over the past 3 years had shown a pattern of increasing erratic decisions, charitable donations his family had not approved of, extended personal absences he had not explained to his son, changes in his estate documents, a growing pattern of what David characterized as cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia. Elizabeth Nakamura opened for the defense. She stated, calmly and precisely, that Mr. Alcott was of entirely sound mind, that his decisions over the past 3 years had been the deliberate acts of a widower coming to terms with the moral weight of his own wealth, that his week of personal absence in October 2018 had been a documented and thoughtful personal experiment, and that the defense would call witnesses who could speak to his mental competence during the exact period the petitioner was citing. David Alcott testified first, at his own attorney's direction. He was polished, well-prepared. He described his growing concern about his father over the past several years. He described specific incidents that he believed showed decline. He was careful never to say the word money or control. He spoke only of concern for his father's well-being. His cross-examination by Elizabeth Nakamura was surgical. Under her questioning, David admitted that he had not visited his father's home in approximately 14 months. He had not spoken to his father by phone more than 4 times in the past year. He was the sole beneficiary of his father's estate under the current will. If a conservatorship were granted, he would have decision-making authority over the family's real estate assets. His father had recently made a large charitable pledge that David had objected to strenuously. David's testimony ended at 11:30. Dr. Margaret Sung, the geriatric psychiatrist, testified next. She was in her 50s, precise, professional. She had evaluated Frank on April 5, 2019, using standard cognitive assessment protocols. Her diagnosis: no evidence of dementia, no evidence of cognitive decline, full mental competence. Cross-examination by William Rathborne was brief and did not shake her. The court broke for lunch at 12:15. We ate at a small deli around the corner. My mother had a bowl of soup. She did not say much. She was praying quietly in her head. I could tell because her lips moved silently every few minutes, and her right hand was in her pocket where her rosary was. At 1:30, we returned to Department 12. Elizabeth Nakamura stood up. "Your Honor, the defense calls Corazon Domingo." My mother stood up. She walked to the front of the courtroom. She was 48 years old at that time, but she looked younger and older at the same time, in the way that Filipino mothers often do. She was 5 feet 2 inches tall. She was wearing her navy dress. Her white lace mantilla was folded in her hand. She placed it on the ledge of the witness box. She was sworn in. She placed her right hand on a Bible. She said, "I do," clearly. She sat down. Elizabeth Nakamura approached the witness stand. "Mrs. Domingo, please tell the court, in your own words, how you came to meet Mr. Franklin Alcott." My mother took a breath. She looked at the judge. She looked at Elizabeth Nakamura. She began, "Ma'am, it was a Wednesday night in October 24th, 2018. It was raining. My son Miguel was working his closing shift at the Filipino grocery store on Saramonte Boulevard where he worked. He called me at 10:47 in the night. He said there was an old man on the bench outside the store in the rain. He said the man had nowhere to go. He asked me what to do. I told him to bring the man home. She continued from there. She described the drive home. She described Frank standing in the doorway of our apartment. She described the towel, the tea, the adobo, the clothes she gave him that had belonged to her husband. She described the couch, the blanket, the 3 days. She spoke for 47 minutes. During those 47 minutes, no one in Department 12 moved. Judge Whitaker took notes twice. William Rathborne watched my mother with the specific still attention of an attorney who was realizing he had underestimated a witness. Frank sat at the defense table with his head slightly bowed. Elizabeth Nakamura asked 7 clarifying questions in total, each one giving my mother the space to say what she wanted to say. At the end of her direct examination, Elizabeth Nakamura asked one final question. Mrs. Domingo, during the 3 days that Mr. Alcott was in your home in October 2018, did he ever appear to you to be confused, disoriented, or mentally impaired in any way? My mother answered without hesitation. No, ma'am. He was tired. He was cold. He was hungry. His body needed care. But his mind was clear. He asked questions I could understand. He answered questions I asked him. He knew who he was. He knew where he was. He prayed with Father Iggy without any confusion. He read the newspaper. He watched the news with us on Friday night. He was of clear mind. That is what I saw. Elizabeth Nakamura nodded once. Thank you, Mrs. Domingo. Nothing further, Your Honor. Judge Whitaker looked at William Rathborne. Rathborne stood up. He straightened his jacket. He approached the witness stand slowly. Mrs. Domingo, thank you for your testimony. I have only a few questions. My mother nodded. You have testified that Mr. Alcott appeared mentally clear to you during your interactions with him. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Do you have any professional training in psychiatry, psychology, or medicine, Mrs. Domingo? No, sir. I clean houses. There was a small silence in the courtroom. William Rathborne shifted slightly. Judge Whitaker looked up briefly from her notes. Rathborne recovered. Then how, Mrs. Domingo, do you feel qualified to assess Mr. Alcott's mental state? My mother looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was completely steady. Sir, I am not a doctor, but I am a mother. I raised a son alone since he was 10 years old. I have cleaned houses for wealthy families for 28 years. I have taken care of my old friend, Nane Lita, who has some memory problems. I have taken care of many elderly parents in the Filipino community who have Alzheimer's. I know what a confused mind looks like. Frank Alcott was not confused. He was thoughtful. There is a difference. I saw it every day for 3 days. That is what I can say. William Rathborne stood very still for a moment. Then he said, Thank you, Mrs. Domingo. No further questions. Judge Whitaker looked at my mother. Mrs. Domingo, thank you for your testimony. You may step down. My mother stood up. She picked up her mantilla. She walked back to the gallery. She sat down beside me. I took her hand. Her hand was cold. She was still trembling slightly, but her face was calm. The hearing continued for another 90 minutes with Frank Alcott's own testimony and closing arguments, but I could not fully absorb it after my mother's 47 minutes on the stand. Judge Whitaker took the matter under advisement at 4:47 p.m. Court was adjourned. On Monday, May 6, 2019, at 3:15 in the afternoon, Elizabeth Nakamura called my mother. I was home. My mother took the call in the kitchen. She listened. She said yes 3 times. She said thank you once. She hung up. She stood there for a moment. Then she said, The judge dismissed the case. It cannot be filed again. Frank has won. I stood up. I hugged my mother. She hugged me back tightly. Then she went to her room, closed the door, and I could hear her praying the rosary softly through the door for the next 20 minutes. That evening she cooked dinner. She said nothing more about it. Nane Lita asked at dinner if everything was okay. My mother said yes, and asked Nane Lita about her arthritis. That was that. 2 weeks later, on the afternoon of Monday, May 20th, 2019, Frank Alcott came back to our apartment. Elizabeth Nakamura was with him. So was a manila folder full of legal documents. Frank explained, sitting on our couch, that he wanted to give my mother a house. A specific house. A 3-bedroom, 1.5-bathroom craftsman-style home on Palmetto Avenue in Daly City, 5 miles from our apartment. He owned it. It was vacant. It was worth approximately $985,000. He wanted to deed it to her, free and clear. No strings, no mortgage. It would be hers. She would never have to pay rent again. She could bring Nane Lita with her. Elizabeth Nakamura had the deed transfer documents prepared. My mother only needed to sign. My mother listened patiently. When Frank finished, she said, "Frank, thank you." But no. Frank looked at her, genuinely shocked. "Cora, I do not understand. Please, let me do this for you." My mother folded her hands in her lap. She looked at Frank with the same steady quiet she had shown him on the witness stand. "Frank, if I take this house, then what I did for you in October becomes something I bought and sold. It becomes payment. It becomes a transaction. That was not what it was. That was not what I am. And I do not want my son to grow up thinking that kindness is something you do, because it might pay you back one day. He watched me feed you in October. He must watch me refuse this now. That is the lesson. Not the house, the refusal." Frank sat with that for a very long time. Elizabeth Nakamura sat quietly beside him. My mother did not say anything more. She let the silence sit. Finally, Frank asked, "Cora, is there anything I can do that would honor what you did without making it a payment?" My mother thought about it. "Frank, there are many Filipino families in Daly City who work very hard and cannot afford to buy a home. If you want to do something with your money, do it for them, not for me." Frank looked at her. Then he looked at Elizabeth Nakamura. Then he looked at me. Then back at my mother. "I will," he said quietly. "I will do that." 6 weeks later, on Monday, July 1st, 2019, the Corazon Foundation was formally established as a 501 service charitable organization headquartered in San Mateo County. Its stated mission was to provide first-time homebuyer assistance grants to low-income immigrant families in San Mateo County. Frank funded it with an initial endowment of $12 million. The name Corazon was, publicly, understood to mean heart in Spanish. My mother agreed only to the first name and refused any public identification with the foundation. She did not attend the launch ceremony. She did not do interviews. Over the next 6 years, between the summer of 2019 and this month, March 2025, the Corazon Foundation has helped 187 immigrant families in San Mateo County purchase their first homes. Most of them were Filipino families. Many of them were house cleaners, nurses, restaurant workers, teachers, and mechanics. Frank kept his promise to my mother. He worked, slowly and imperfectly, on his relationship with his son David. It took years. It required both of them to change. By 2022, they were speaking regularly. By 2024, they were working together on the foundation. Elizabeth Nakamura told my mother, in one of the occasional letters that Frank and my mother exchanged over the years, that Frank considered the reconciliation with his son the single most important thing he had done in the last decade of his life. Frank Alcott died on February 14, 2025, in his home in Hillsborough. His son David was at his bedside. He was 79 years old. His last documented words to Elizabeth Nakamura, spoken on the morning of his death, were, "Tell Cora I kept my promise." 3 days later, Elizabeth Nakamura drove to our apartment on Wellington Way and delivered the message personally to my mother. My mother crossed herself. She said, "Salamat sa Diyos." Thank God. I am writing this now on the evening of March 2nd, 2025. My mother is in the next room. She does not know I am telling this story. She would not want me to. She would say it is not for public discussion. She would say that what she did was ordinary, and that the story does not belong to her. I am telling it anyway, because I believe she is wrong about that. My mother still cleans houses. She has cut back to only 2 clients now, 2 women in Hillsborough who have been her clients for over 20 years and have become, over that time, something like family. She goes to their homes twice a week. They no longer let her do heavy work. They pay her more than the work is worth. They know what she did in 2019 because Elizabeth Nakamura eventually told them. They love her. My mother lives with me and my wife Annalyn now in a 2-bedroom apartment in Daly City that Annalyn and I rent. She has her own room. She still refuses to let us buy her a new car. She still attends Our Lady of Perpetual Help every Sunday morning at the 8:30 Mass. Father Iggy is still there, older now, slower, but he still shakes her hand every Sunday at the door and asks after her. Nanay Lita passed away peacefully in her sleep in 2021, at the age of 71. My mother buried her. Marisol is still my mother's best friend. I graduated from nursing school in the spring of 2020. I am now a registered nurse at USSF Medical Center in San Francisco. I work on the cardiac care unit. I have not lost a patient to a heart attack in 3.5 years that I could have prevented with more knowledge or faster action. I hope I never do. My father is with me every shift. Annalyn and I were married in 2022 at Our Lady of Perpetual Help. My mother made all the food for the reception herself, refusing all offers of help until 3 days before the wedding when she finally accepted Marisol's assistance with the desserts. It was the happiest I had ever seen her. That is where the story ends, I think. Except for this. My mother has one thing on her dresser that she has kept for many years, a small tin box. Inside the box, she keeps my father's old wedding ring, my first communion prayer card, the 2 hospital wristbands from her miscarriages, the folded piece of paper with Frank's original phone number from October 2018, and one more thing that she added in the fall of 2019. It is a photograph. Elizabeth Nakamura sent it to her privately, with a short note, 6 months after the Corazon Foundation was established. The photograph is of a Filipino family, a father, a mother, 2 young children, and an older grandmother, standing in front of a small green house in South San Francisco, holding a large paper key. The father is a maintenance worker. The mother is a nurse's aide. They had been renting a 1-bedroom apartment with all 4 of them, plus the grandmother, for 9 years. The Corazon Foundation had just helped them buy that green house. On the back of the photograph, in careful ballpoint pen, Elizabeth Nakamura had written a single line. The first one, Cora, he wanted you to see. My mother keeps that photograph in the tin box because she says it is the only proof that anyone might ever need that what she did on a rainy night in October of 2018 was not nothing. I do not think she needs proof, but I am telling you her story anyway. Because there are Franklin Alcotts in the world who are looking for kindness they cannot buy, and there are Coras who will give it to them without knowing who they are or what it will cost, and most of the time, no one will ever hear about it. Most of the time, no one will ever say thank you. But once in a while, a very rich man dies with a message on his lips. And once in a while, an attorney drives 12 miles to deliver that message to a house cleaner in Daly City. And once in a while, a son sits down at his kitchen table on an evening in March and writes down what his mother would never tell anyone. Once in a while, the story gets told. This time, it did. So here's my question for you. When was the last time you offered shelter, or food, or a warm word to someone who had nothing to give you back? And when was the last time someone did that for you, and you never knew what it cost them? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if this story reminded you of your own mother, your own grandmother, or the quiet, dignified woman in your family who gave everything and asked for nothing, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Because the Coras of the world will not tell their own stories. Someone else has to. This is my mother's. Thank you for listening to it.